I knew something was wrong the second I heard the sound of a backhoe idling outside my bedroom window. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who panics easily, spent 7 years wiring forward operating bases in the middle of nowhere with worse wake-up calls, but the beep, beep, beep of construction equipment reversing 10 feet from my house still gets your blood moving faster than coffee ever will. I threw on jeans and boots and walked outside barefoot, holding one sock in my hand and glaring like a man who just discovered a bear on his porch. Because essentially, I had. Except this bear was a neon-vested guy named Rick, who was halfway through digging up the gravel border of my private driveway. Next to him, a freshly printed HOA sign staked right into my lawn. Future site, Oak Haven Trail Extension, improving access for the community. There was even a rendering of the finished public road, complete with benches and fake kids holding balloons. It looked like something out of a developer's wet dream. I stared at it for a few seconds before I laughed. Out loud. It wasn't a funny laugh, it was the kind of laugh that makes people take a step back and wonder if you're about to lose it. Rick didn't flinch. "Morning, sir, we're just getting started on the trail connection. Shouldn't take more than a week." "Right," I said, still half laughing, half considering how fast I could pull up that stake and launch it into the HOA clubhouse. "And what exactly makes you think you have permission to rip up my driveway?" He blinked. Bryce Holloway signed off. Said this section was under community jurisdiction now. HOA Expansion Project. "Expansion," I repeated, dragging out the word like it had just dropped from an alien spacecraft. "This is a private road, always has been. You're telling me Bryce sent you to dig up a private road and didn't even knock on the door first?" Rick looked uncomfortable. He said it was cleared last month, legal and everything. That's when I really stopped laughing. Because what Rick didn't know, and what the HOA was about to find out in the most painful, expensive way possible, was that this road wasn't just gravel and asphalt. It was mine, and more than that, it was ours. Me and Uncle Frank built this road ourselves 15 years ago with rented equipment, sweat, and enough profanity to offend the surrounding forest. It runs along the southern edge of my property, right up to the tree line where the HOA boundary stops. That was the whole point. Frank made damn sure we stayed outside their jurisdiction when he bought the land. And he told me once, as we were laying the last piece of rebar, they'll try to take this one day, mark my words. They'll call it beautification or access or community improvement, but what they really mean is control. Turns out he was right. Again, Uncle Frank passed 2 years ago, left the house, the shop, and the land to me. Every nail, every pipe, every weird half-finished project in the garage, I inherited it all, including this driveway. People don't get it unless they've had something like this in their life. It's not just a road, it's history, it's independence. It's two people building something with their own hands and flipping the bird to everyone who told them they couldn't. Frank never trusted the HOA types. Called them Clipboard Tyrants. That was before Bryce Holloway took over Oak Haven Trails and started pushing his little empire outward, like HOA Napoleon with the printed newsletter. The road was always off limits, and now they were trying to pave right over it. Which meant, like it or not, it was time for me to stop installing solar panels and start installing some boundaries of my own. So, here's where it all started getting weird. Couple days after the whole backhoe fiasco, I figured that was the end of it. I told Rick, politely but firmly, that unless he had a court order or a time machine, he better back his cat off my gravel. He grumbled something about just following orders and left without making a scene, which I appreciated. I didn't hear anything the rest of that week. Thought maybe, just maybe, the message had gotten through. Then on Sunday, I check my mailbox and find this envelope. Now, my property's not even in Oak Haven Trails, mind you. I'm not a member, never paid dues, never signed anything. That's why this letter, sealed with the HOA logo and smelling faintly of smugness, hit a nerve the second I opened it. Inside was a printed notice on thick, unnecessarily expensive paper. Notice of non-compliance, property 1,181 Franks Way. Violation, unpermitted barricade across newly designated community thoroughfare. Fine, $175, payable within 15 days. I stood there on my porch for a solid minute, just rereading it like the words might change. The barricade they were referring to? That'd be the rusted out chain with the private road, no trespassing sign I put up the week Frank died. It's been there ever since. No one's ever questioned it before. But apparently now, according to the HOA, my driveway wasn't mine anymore. It was a thoroughfare, a word that only HOA board members and medieval warlords ever use. I flipped the letter over. Sure enough, signed at the bottom in perfect cursive, Bryce Holloway, HOA President. And under that, like a punchline, preserving harmony through order. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Harmony. That man couldn't preserve a houseplant, let alone neighborhood harmony. Bryce and I had spoken exactly once since I moved in. He showed up on my property line in a little golf cart like he was inspecting troops, introduced himself with the fakest grin I've ever seen, and handed me a laminated packet titled Community Living the Oak Haven Way. I told him respectfully that my land wasn't part of Oak Haven Trails and that packet was going straight in the recycling. He didn't take it well. That was 18 months ago. Now, out of nowhere, he was fining me for blocking access to my own driveway. I called the number at the bottom of the notice. A perky-sounding woman answered. "Hello, Oak Haven Trails." "Administrative office, this is Jenna. How can I assist you today?" "Yeah, hi Jenna, this is Travis Mendez. I live on 1181 Franks Way, outside your jurisdiction, just to be clear. I got a letter about some kind of violation?" "Oh, yes, I see that here. You've got a barricade across a shared-use access road." "It's my driveway," I said flatly. "Well," she said, clearly reading from a script, "as part of the recent Community Connectivity Initiative, several private easements have been converted to shared-use roads to promote accessibility, emergency response, and pedestrian-friendly development." I had to put her on speaker so I could rub my temples with both hands. "Jenna, I own that road. It's not an easement. It's private property. It was built by me and my uncle. I have the plat maps, the survey, and the original permits to prove it." "Oh, okay," she said, caught off guard for a second, then bouncing back into HOA bot mode. "If you believe there's been an error in classification, you're welcome to submit a dispute in writing using Form 49B Community Zoning Clarification Request." I hung up. No way was I going to argue over my own damn driveway using a form that sounded like it was invented in a Kafka novel. That week, I noticed some small things changing. A couple cars I didn't recognize started using my road to cut through from one part of the neighborhood to the other. One guy even waved at me like he lived there. Another jogger had the nerve to stop and ask if I'd consider trimming back those prickly shrubs because they scratched his dog's legs during their morning runs. At night, I started hearing more foot traffic, flashlights, laughter. They were treating my driveway like a damn park path. The chain didn't stop them anymore. Someone had cut it. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an opening move, and Bryce Holloway had just made it personal. At first, I thought maybe Bryce was just trying to bluff his way into some kind of soft victory. You know, push boundaries, see if I'd cave, like those idiots in line who accidentally step 6 inches in front of you and act surprised when you say something. But nah, Bryce wasn't bluffing. A week after the fake fine letter, I came home from a job in Crestwood, hot, sweaty, covered in drywall dust, and I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The sign. The new one. Mounted on a gleaming aluminum post right at the mouth of my driveway in official HOA green and white lettering, like they'd pulled it straight off a city ordinance. Oak Haven Trails, community access route. Residents only, speed limit. 15 mph, no parking on shoulders. I just stood there in the truck, air conditioner wheezing, engine still running, staring at it like it had grown out of the gravel on its own. They'd named my road, labeled it community access, claimed it like explorers planting a flag. That was bad enough. But the real gut punch came 3 days later. I woke up, stepped out front with my usual cup of black coffee and a slice of leftover pizza, and saw the memorial plaque was gone, the one for Uncle Frank. We'd mounted it ourselves a month before he passed. Brass, etched with the words Frank's Way, built with his hands, kept with heart. It sat right where the gravel started on a big stone we'd hauled from the riverbed together. I stared at the bare stone for a full minute before I even registered what I was looking at. It didn't make sense, like a missing tooth in a smile you've seen your whole life. Gone. Just gone. I checked the ditch, checked the weeds. Nothing. And the real kicker, sitting in the middle of my driveway where the plaque used to be? A laminated HOA flyer flapping in the breeze. Let's build a connected community. Oak Haven Trails is expanding safe access routes for all residents. Join us at the next HOA meeting to discuss the future of our neighborhood. There was a stock photo of a smiling family on bicycles. Helmeted, diverse, and completely oblivious to the metaphorical middle finger they'd just handed me. I called Bryce that morning. Got his voicemail, of course. His voice sounded as smug as I remembered. "Hi, this is Bryce Holloway with Oak Haven Trails. If this is in regard to a community initiative, please leave a detailed message with your lot number." Click. I didn't leave a message. I wasn't going to yell into a void. Instead, I printed an 8x11 photo of Uncle Frank standing by the road the day we finished it, hammer in one hand, middle finger in the other, taped it right to that aluminum post under the speed limit sign. Next morning, torn down. And this time, they left a new note taped to my front door. Typed. Formal. Almost apologetic in tone, like that made it better. Dear resident, due to recent reports of increased unauthorized signage and emotional interference with shared property, the Oak Haven Trails Board has voted to install permanent lighting and landscaping along the access route formerly known as Frank's Way. This is for the safety and beautification of our community. Emotional interference? What kind of Stepford nightmare language is that? They took Frank's plaque, claimed the road, tore down a photo of the man who built it, and now they wanted to light it up like a suburban runway? That was the moment it stopped being annoying and started cutting deep, because up until then, I'd taken it like a joke gone too far. Just HOA nonsense, power-tripping busybodies with nothing better to do. But now, they were erasing him, erasing us, turning something real into just another line item on Bryce's personal empire map. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on the porch with a beer, staring down the stretch of road we'd built, lit only by moonlight and the occasional flicker of a passing car's headlights. I thought about Frank, how he used to sit in the same spot, chewing sunflower seeds and muttering about people who want everything paved, polished, and pre-approved. I realized two things. One, this wasn't going away on its own. And two, if I didn't push back soon, I was going to lose more than a driveway. I was going to lose everything he stood for. And hell, if I was going to let that happen on my watch. I decided to do it the right way first. Well, the official way anyway. As satisfying as it would have been to rip that new sign out of the ground with my bare hands and shove it through Bryce's HOA mailbox, I figured I'd try going the route of logic, reason, and, God help me, paperwork. So I started by driving down to the county recorder's office. Not exactly a thrilling afternoon, unless you're into fluorescent lighting and suspiciously sticky pens chained to counters. But I needed proof. Not for me, I knew the property was mine, but to wave under the HOA's nose like a rolled-up newspaper. The clerk, a woman named Pam who looked like she'd been through every kind of zoning dispute known to man, pulled the plat map in under 5 minutes. There, she said, tapping it with a perfectly manicured nail. Your lot line ends here. The HOA boundary is a good 20 feet away. That road is entirely on your parcel. And there's no easement? She gave me a look like I'd just asked if Kansas had mountains. Nope, not even a utility easement. Whoever built this road did it completely independently, honestly, kind of impressive. I smiled. Thanks, my uncle and I built it ourselves. Well, she said, raising an eyebrow, then you might want to hang on to this copy. Sounds like someone's trying to make your land their shortcut. Pam printed out the map, stamped it, and even included the original land use certification from 2008, back when Frank got the initial construction permit. Armed with that, I wrote a calm, very professional letter. Attached the documents, highlighted the parcel lines, bolded the phrase private property not part of Oak Haven Trails. I even threw in a bullet point summary, short, clear, polite. The kind of thing that says, I'm not crazy, I'm just not stupid either. Dropped it off at the HOA office in person. It's a brick box near the neighborhood tennis courts with a fake stone sign out front that reads Community First, which is adorable considering how hard they're trying to steamroll anyone not in their little cult of mulch and mailbox conformity. The receptionist, a girl in her 20s who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, took my letter and promised to pass it along to Mr. Holloway. I asked when the next board meeting was. She said it was members only. I reminded her, again, that my property wasn't part of the HOA, but their actions were now affecting it directly. She smiled in that way people do when they're legally required not to say, not my problem. 2 days later, I got a response. Not from Bryce, from the HOA's lawyer. Yep, a guy named Chandler M. Green, Yes, he used all 3 names, sent me a 2-page email filled with phrases like community interest alignment, informal jurisdiction extension, and my personal favorite, customary use precedent. According to Chandler, since multiple community residents had been using the road for several months, and since the HOA had invested funds into signage and planning for infrastructure enhancements, it now constituted a de facto community access route. Basically, because they'd started trespassing and slapped a sign down, they now had squatters' rights. I replied, attaching a copy of the land documents again, and politely informed him that trespassing and illegal signage don't usually hold up as legal grounds for land grabs. Never heard back. So I showed up to the next HOA meeting anyway, walked right into their little clubhouse conference room, khakis, boots, clipboard in hand like I was presenting a wiring quote, and sat down in the back corner. Bryce saw me immediately. His smile tightened so hard I thought his molars might snap. We'll begin shortly, he said to the room, then walked straight over to me. Mr. Mendez, he greeted me all sunshine and poisoned syrup. This meeting is for members only. As I've mentioned before, I cut him off. Bryce, you've staked signs on my property. Find me for a barricade on land you don't own. And your HOA has been selling the idea that my driveway is open to community use. so I'm gonna sit right here until you explain yourself." He blinked, just once, then leaned down and whispered, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Nobody's trying to take your land. We're improving the neighborhood." I leaned back, keeping my voice even, then improve it somewhere else. That was pretty much it. They called a vote later in the meeting to pursue integration of adjacent access routes under community oversight. It passed. Of course, because it's easy to win a vote when you don't let the actual landowner in the room. That night, I found out they'd scheduled contractors to start trenching for landscape lighting the following week, on my land, without a permit, without asking. That was the last straw, because I'd tried to be civil, patient. Hell, I even brought printed maps, and they responded with lawyers, lies, and a public vote pretending I didn't exist. Fine, they wanted to play power games? They were about to learn what happens when the quiet guy with an electrical license, a military pension, and a long fuse finally runs out of slack. And man, I had just the plan in mind. About a week after that disaster of a board meeting, I went looking for one last card to play. Not revenge, not yet, just understanding, because there had to be something more to this. Bryce wasn't stupid, arrogant, absolutely. Smug enough to mistake a mirror for a friend? Sure, but not a full-blown moron. And no one pushes this hard over a gravel driveway unless there's something bigger going on. So I went digging. Figuratively at first. I started with Frank's old safe in the garage. It hadn't been opened since he passed. I'd left it out of respect. Never felt like snooping through a dead man's documents. But now felt like exactly the right time to see what he'd been keeping locked up. Combination still worked. Same one he used on every damn padlock he ever owned. 1976-04. Year of his birth, number of beers he claimed to drink that July 4th. Inside were two folders, a bag of silver coins, a .38 revolver wrapped in a dish towel, and a stack of letters. The revolver, for the record, was clean, untouched, probably more sentimental than functional. But the folders? They were loaded. Turns out Frank wasn't just paranoid about the HOA, he was prepared. One folder was full of communication records going back to 2005, HOA mailers, threatening letters, handwritten notes with dates and names, and right in the middle, paperclipped to a manila envelope, was a photocopy of a letter from Bryce himself. Back when he was still just Bryce Holloway, vice chair of community planning, before he bought half the properties on his block, before he crowned himself king of Oak Haven. The letter was addressed to Frank, dated February 2007, proposing a unified access corridor through non-member lots to support future development plans. It included a map, and guess what was marked in bright red? Frank's driveway, the same driveway I'm standing over now. The kicker, scribbled at the bottom in Frank's handwriting, tried to buy the road, told him to piss up a rope. That made me smile, but what made my stomach drop came in the second folder. It was technical, detailed, stamped with the town engineer's seal from 2011. Buried in the packet was a schematic showing underground conduit lines for the HOA's streetlight grid, fed from the northeast transformer. Guess where the northeast transformer sits? Yup, on my land. Specifically, it's buried about 30 feet past the fence line, just beside a cluster of old cedars where Frank used to store scrap metal and firewood. There's even a signed acknowledgement in the file from the original HOA president, some guy named Tanner who stepped down years ago, stating the installation was temporary and pending an official easement to be filed and negotiated. You want to guess what never got filed? The easement. Which means for the past 12 years, the HOA has been running a not insignificant portion of its community lighting off a transformer sitting illegally on my private land. No contract, no payment, no legal right. And there it was, the missing puzzle piece. They weren't just trying to steal my road because it was scenic or good for joggers, they were trying to cover their ass. If I found out they'd been tapping into my land for free power and worse, infrastructure, they could be liable for who knows how much in back usage and legal damages. And Bryce? He was sitting on that secret like a man balancing on a barbed fence, too arrogant to admit fault, too scared to come clean, and too stupid to realize Frank had kept records. I sat there on the garage floor for a long time, folders spread around me, dust in my nose, and a storm in my chest. Because now it wasn't just about a sign. It wasn't even about the plaque. It was about stealing from my family for over a decade, quietly, confidently, like we were too dumb or too dead to notice. And I wasn't gonna let that go. Not just because it was wrong, but because Frank saw it coming and gave me everything I'd need to fight back. I looked at that transformer the next morning, sipping my coffee with a new kind of calm. They'd buried their mistake on my land, Now it was time to dig up the truth and maybe cut the lights on the whole damn operation. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry, I mean, I was, but that wasn't it. It was that weird buzz you get when something clicks into place, like when you finally remember the name of the song that's been stuck in your head for 2 weeks, or you fix something that 3 contractors told you was unfixable. That kind of thrill, that itch, because now I had something better than outrage. I had leverage. So I did what Frank always taught me to do when I was up against something bigger than me. Break it down like a circuit board. Step 1. Confirm the transformer's still active. I grabbed my multimeter, walked out to the cedar grove, popped the lid off the junction box buried next to it, and tested the feed. Sure enough, the sucker was hot. Steady draw, too, meant it was pulling juice consistently, likely on a timer grid, which made sense for streetlights. Step 2. Map it. Trace the underground cable's direction. That part was easier than expected. Frank had already done it in 2012. I just added a few updates, took my own notes, even marked a section where the cable ran less than 6 inches from the surface. Very not code, by the way. Step 3. Talk to someone who knows how deep this rabbit hole goes. So I called up Sam. Sam Whitaker is one of those guys who's equal parts caffeine and conspiracy, works for the city's electrical department. Bit of a nut, but solid on code and inspections. We'd done a solar install together back in January for a private school out in Ridgewood, and he owed me a favor. I told him I needed help understanding the liability of a utility line crossing private property without an easement. He paused for like 2 seconds before going, "Oof, that's bad, real bad. Did they get temporary written consent?" "Nope." "Then technically they're trespassing and stealing power. If it's a public service line routed over private land without legal right-of-way or compensation, that's civil and criminal." Even if it's an HOA? Especially if it's an HOA. Exactly what I needed to hear. Now I knew the law was on my side, if I was smart about it, so I got smart. First, I scheduled a formal inspection of the electrical setup on my property. Not a complaint, just an internal safety review. That way, when things got ugly later, I'd have a certified city doc saying I found inconsistencies and took responsible action. Then I had a surveyor come out, quietly, mark the exact parcel line with flagged stakes and bright spray paint. When you're about to draw a line in the sand, might as well make it literal. And then came the real cherry on top. I drafted an invoice. Yep, a bill, itemized, clean. Professional looking with my company's letterhead. Power infrastructure usage. Unauthorized installation and 12 years of grid, tapped through private transformer, $13,728. Based on conservative estimates of monthly draw, regional rates, and seasonal load increase. Attached a payment due date, net 30, just like a vendor, and printed 2 copies, one for Bryce and one for the town's municipal ethics board. But I wasn't done, because here's the thing about HOA types like Bryce. They don't scare easy when it's just one guy yelling. You want to rattle them? You let other people do the yelling. So I started talking. Carefully. I stopped by the local coffee shop where Mrs. Halverson, the nicest retiree on the planet, usually held court with 3 other women from Oak Haven. Brought them muffins, told them I was looking into some funny business with the road. They asked questions. I let them connect the dots. Next day, I stopped by the community garden, talked to Carl, the guy who runs the compost program, told him I was dealing with a weird zoning issue involving power, mentioned that someone had been drawing from private land without permission. Didn't name names, didn't have to. By the time I got back home, the neighborhood Facebook group was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Apparently, Bryce had a few more enemies than I thought. Quiet ones. Longtime residents who didn't like how he streamlined the rules. People who got fined for planter boxes or wind chimes or non-neutral trim paint. One guy posted that he got written up for a kid's tree swing. A swing, man. Now the rumors had fuel, and I didn't even have to lie. I just let the truth float. And while all that was stewing, I was prepping the ace in my back pocket. The shutoff. See, if I disconnected the transformer directly, that'd technically make me liable for damages caused by service interruption, even if it was illegal. But if it went down for maintenance, as part of a documented safety inspection, that's legal, smart, and untouchable. So I scheduled it, gave myself a week to tie the bow on everything. My invoice was ready, the survey was signed, the inspection report was coming, and the HOA, they were about to experience what it felt like when the lights go out, literally and figuratively. So 7 days later, on the dot, I flipped the first switch. Metaphorically at first. The morning started off quiet. Overcast sky, no wind, the kind of day that feels like it's holding its breath. I walked out to my truck with a thermos of black coffee and my usual half-hearted optimism. In the passenger seat, my bright orange, property access temporarily restricted, electrical work in progress, sign, freshly laminated, zip ties ready. I'd printed 3 more just in case. First stop was the transformer site. I'd cleared it with the inspector from the city, good guy named Ron, built like a linebacker, didn't ask dumb questions. He'd already sent me a confirmation report stating that the underground cabling was not documented through official channels and constituted a potential safety risk. Bingo. That gave me cover to shut it down for safety inspection and possible removal pending resolution. At 8:42 a.m., I cut the line. Not maliciously. Just like I was trained. Clean disconnect, documented, photographed, and capped properly. Whole thing took under 10 minutes. By 9:05, Oak Haven's eastern quadrant, aka the fancy side, was in the dark. No streetlights, no irrigation timers, no motion sensor entry signs blinking their useless little lights. Within the hour, people started noticing. By 10:30, the Oak Haven Trails Facebook group had 6 separate posts about unexplained outages and possible sabotage, all with just the right level of panic. My favorite was one lady who posted, "Does anyone know if this is a solar flare thing? My landscape lighting just died." At 11:15, I emailed Bryce directly. Subject: outstanding balance and property status. Bryce, as you are aware, the transformer located on my private parcel has been providing power to HOA infrastructure for the last 12 years without a filed easement or compensation. Per my formal notice, and after a certified safety inspection, the power supply was disconnected this morning pending resolution. Please find attached. Formal invoice, $13,728. Parcel survey confirming boundary. County documentation verifying land ownership and HOA exclusion. Photos of installation and disconnection. Failure to remit payment or negotiate terms within 14 days will result in civil action. Best regards, Travis Mendez. Owner, 1181 Franks Way. State certified electrical contractor. I signed it real polite. You always go extra polite when you're twisting the knife. By 12:45, I got a reply, not from Bryce, from Chandler M. Green, Eskers, again. This time, he sounded very interested in resolving things amicably. Translation: they were panicking, but I wasn't done. At 3 p.m. sharp, I rolled out Phase 2. I'd spent the week installing a fully automated security gate at the head of the driveway. Paid for it myself. Heavy-duty steel frame, solar-powered, camera-enabled, and equipped with a beautiful little RFID reader that made the most satisfying beep when you tapped a tag. I mounted a second sign right above it. Private road, toll access only. Authorized vehicles, emergency services, delivery personnel, guests. Unauthorized use subject to daily toll fee, $5 per vehicle per day. Pay by QR code or via Mendez Systems LLC invoice portal. Yeah, I made a toll road. Out of spite? Maybe, but legally, ironclad. I wasn't charging my neighbors, I was charging non-consensual users who'd been encouraged by the HOA to treat my land like a public alley. And guess what? The city confirmed I had every right to restrict access. Not a public easement, not a shared road. Private land. Period. That night, I watched through the camera feed as a black Escalade pulled up to the gate and stopped. Guess who? Bryce Holloway himself. Stepping out, khakis perfectly pressed, hair a little too slick, holding a clipboard like it could shield him from consequences. He didn't have an access tag, so the gate stayed closed. He tried to wave at the camera. I didn't respond. After a minute, he got back in the Escalade, backed up, and drove the long way around, adding about 11 minutes to his commute, which I'll admit gave me a very specific kind of joy. But the real cherry came 2 days later. That's when the first HOA resident filed a formal complaint against Bryce for mismanagement of infrastructure funds and unauthorized resource dependency. Someone had started asking questions about where their dues were going. More followed. Turns out, when you find someone for an unapproved mailbox color, they really don't like finding out their leadership was stealing power from a dead man's transformer. By the end of the week, a few brave souls on the board reached out to me personally. I could hear it in their voices: exhaustion, guilt, maybe a little fear. One guy, Dan, even said, "I didn't know they were using your land." Bryce told us it was already part of the common area. I told him I'd be happy to explain everything in front of the whole community, on my terms. The HOA called a special community meeting the following Thursday night. Not a regular meeting, not their usual wine and whispers potluck at the clubhouse. No, this one was in the Oak Haven Elementary Gymnasium. Full folding chairs, microphones, actual agenda. They said it was to address resident concerns regarding recent disruptions in infrastructure services, which is HOA speak for. Bryce got caught with his hand in the power socket. I showed up early, not because I'm dramatic, okay, maybe a little, but because I wanted a good seat. Sat 3 rows back, dead center, clipboard in my lap, folder of documents under one arm, and my city inspector's report in the other. Room was packed, easily 100 people, some still in tennis gear, some in dress shirts straight from work, some clearly just there for the drama. Bryce came in 10 minutes late. He looked off. The tan wasn't quite as glowy, the hair not quite as slick. He wore a tight smile that looked like it had been ironed onto his face, probably practicing it in the mirror all day. He opened the meeting with a long, rambling speech about community values and challenges of growth, and my personal favorite, navigating complex property boundaries in transitional areas. When he finally shut up, the questions started. Softballs at first. One lady asked when the lights would be back on. Someone else wanted to know why the irrigation system wasn't working on Oakcrest Lane. Then Carl stood up. Carl, the compost guy I'd chatted with a week earlier, cleared his throat and asked, "Is it true the HOA's streetlights were running off a private transformer that was never authorized or paid for?" You could have heard a squirrel blink. Bryce blinked. "I'm not sure that's, relevant to..." "It's relevant," Carl said louder this time, "especially if you lied to the board about it." That's when Dan, the board member who'd called me, stood up and motioned toward me. "Travis Mendez is here tonight," he said. "He's the property owner in question. I'd like to hear what he has to say." I stood up slowly, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted every eye in that room to land on me before I opened my mouth. I didn't yell, didn't accuse, just laid it out, plain and calm. I'm not a member of Oak Haven Trails, never have been. My property has been independently owned for 15 years. My uncle and I built that road with our own hands. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it, never did. I held up a printout of the parcel map. This is the official survey from the county. Here's the transformer location, smack on my land. Then I held up the inspection report. City inspector confirmed the line was undocumented and unsafe. I shut it down last week, legally, safely, because no one asked for permission. Not then, not ever. And then the invoice. Here's the bill for 12 years of unauthorized electrical usage, $13,728, not counting potential code violations. People were whispering now. Phones came out, screens lighting up with Facebook posts faster than I could finish. "But that's not really the point, is it?" I said, lowering my voice a little. "The point is, someone's been using my land and my resources without consent, then tried to label it as community property, posted signs, sent fines, tried to erase a plaque I placed for my late uncle. That's not just mismanagement, that's fraud, and it's theft." I looked Bryce dead in the eye. "And you knew." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Dan stepped in again. "I move that the board suspend President Holloway pending investigation." A few gasps, a few seconded calls from the audience. Votes were counted right there in the room. 57 in favor, 8 against. The rest just stunned. Bryce stood there frozen, hand still gripping his folder like it could protect him. He finally muttered, "This is a circus," and walked out without another word. People started clapping, not cheering. Just slow, grateful clapping, like they'd been holding their breath for years and finally let it out. After the meeting, a half-dozen residents came up to shake my hand. One woman teared up and said, "My husband got fined for planting tomatoes too close to the sidewalk. I thought we were the crazy ones." "Nope," I said. "You were just stuck in a system that forgot who it was supposed to serve." The next morning, the Oak Haven Trails sign at the end of my driveway mysteriously disappeared. I didn't ask who took it. I didn't care. But I did leave the toll gate up. Just for a few more days. Call it a reminder. South. Couple months went by. Things settled down in Oak Haven the way spring settles in after a long, ugly winter. Not all at once, little by little. The new HOA board got elected. Dan stayed on, this time as president. First thing he did? Dismantled the Community Connectivity Initiative and issued a formal letter to every homeowner stating that private property lines would be respected, period. They even added a new clause to their charter about jurisdictional overreach. Fancy way of saying don't pull a Bryce. I got my invoice paid too. Not by the HOA, they refused to admit wrongdoing of course, but by their insurance provider. Quiet wire transfer, full amount, $13,728. I used it to pave the road properly, all the way to the edge of my property, just the way Frank always wanted it. Smooth blacktop, clean gravel shoulders, drainage the county inspector would drool over. Even installed a new wooden archway at the entrance with a laser-carved sign. Frank's Way, built by hand, defended by heart. Yeah, I brought the plaque back too, mounted it right into a boulder, cemented that sucker in so tight you'd need explosives to move it. Funny thing is, after everything that happened, the neighbors started using the real entrance again, the one that loops around like it's supposed to. No more joggers cutting through, no more random cars. People actually knock now if they stop by, and I don't need the toll gate anymore. Took it down last week, gave the parts to a friend who's setting up his own property line across town. I told him, if they push back harder. Just make sure you do it smarter. That was the lesson, I think. I could have screamed, could have sued, could have dug trenches and gone full paranoid militia mode, but instead, I just used what I had. Documents, logic, a little electricity, and let them ruin themselves with their own arrogance. Frank would have loved it. Walter Jenkins came by the other day, brought a six-pack and a lawn chair, sat under the archway with me, chewing sunflower seeds and watching the sun dip behind the cedars. You know, he said, nodding at the fresh blacktop, I never thought I'd see the day someone beat the HOA at their own game. Me neither, I said, cracking a beer, but turns out they never read the fine print. He chuckled. Frank'd be proud. We sat there a long while in the quiet. No traffic, no construction, no clipboard tyrants, just peace. And for the first time in years, that stretch of road didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home. And this time, it was mine, all the way to the line.